And moving on to our final segment, the game of some other year. So the whole idea of this segment, as we flagged last week, is really that, because we're lazy and stingy, we don't like buying new games. If any publishers are happy to give us codes, we're more than happy to play those games. But until anything like that ever happens, we'll play the odd new game. But, the thing that I always believe is, and we've had this debate offline a lot of times about the Oscars and film of the year. I feel like you almost need to give it a few years to be able to judge it anyway. So judging in the current year, while I understand the imperative to do that, I think it's much fairer to actually judge a game many years after it's already come out and sort of understand it in its context of when it was released and, did it actually move the needle in that year and in that era? Because I think a lot of games that were considered really good back then are sort of a bit like, are they that really great in the end? And they're sort of, fallen out of favor, almost to a point where people think it's funny that they were regarded as Game of the Year back in the day. So the task was for both of us to think about what year we should pick and the reasons why, and then basically hash it out and land on a year and then start playing those games pretty systematically and have a game of some other year for the year X, whatever we decide, by the end of the segment. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think we need to hash out a couple of details here. So
okay.
no, something that we haven't actually discussed this offline with everything that's been talked about on the podcast. And are we also going to do a top 10 and we've obviously one at the top? Because I think that would be more interesting than just choosing one game.
Yeah, I think always with these things, to me, I feel like we probably have to have our own individual top 10s, and then we need to make an official BigWIG top 10.
Okay.
And then we'll have to hash it out. And we'll have to have some kind of fun way to do it. Like maybe some trading system and some, wild cards or whatever. It's got to be fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the second question was, how are we, if we're playing a game from, let's say, a year, and that game's being re-released on another console, are we able to play and judge it on that version? Knowing that...
No, we did mention that, though. We mentioned that last week.
I don't remember us, getting into HD remaster territory and things like that.
Yeah, look, okay. So I think ultimately it does need to be a judgment call between both of us of what is the games that we can consider, fair game. I think that if it's just a simple up-res or they've not really done much to it, it doesn't count. I think something like Final Fantasy VII Remake obviously would count. And then I think there's a grey area where they've actually changed elements of the game and maybe you can consider it. But I really think we should just stick to when, it's actually new, like a new game, not like a remake or a remaster in general.
Well, yeah, and I just want to make sure because some of these games I might only have access to playing in those versions, so I just kind of want to make sure that we had that. But if it's a matter of us just working through and saying, well, actually, let's say, Yakuza is this famous series for remaking. They remade the older games in the newer engines. And so while the games are very similar, they've got a lot of the new systems and enhancements from the later games. So that's an example where it's awkward, but then you can only really play those games on modern consoles and modern platforms in that form unless you go and dig out a PlayStation 2, for instance. So it's tricky. And I think also our access to actually what games we can play will impact what year we choose, because there's, especially when you start to get around the mid-2000s, a lot of those games aren't. There are ways to emulate them, for instance, but generally speaking, it's a lot tougher than, let's say, games before the year 2000 and modern consoles that generally have backwards compatibility and things like that on them. And generally every game's on Steam, but there's definitely period of time there where it might be difficult to actually try to track these games down and play them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, let's be just sensible about it. I think it's probably fine to play a, up-res version or a remaster version. I think, obviously, going back to the Final Fantasy VII example, if we decide on the year that Final Fantasy VII came out, then playing Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't count for Final Fantasy VII, but I think playing the ported version of Final Fantasy VII, where they have modified it and they've made certain bits a lot easier or a lot more kind of bearable, where you could speed up the game, I think that counts as a version to play it on. I think that's fine.
What about something like Final Fantasy 3, where they made the 3D remake for Nintendo DS and other platforms, where the actual game and structure is the same, but it is much easier from a design standpoint. Like, I think this is important because
I think you just call it out. I think like that, because you can just play Final Fantasy 3 on the emulated version quite easily. Like, I think that one's probably not the best example, but just that idea, I do get it. And this did color the games that I was thinking of talking about, or the years that I was thinking of talking about, because some of the even PC games from specific eras are actually kind of like a bit of a pain to get. Like, you need to literally like buy them from scratch on GOG or something, because that, comes with an emulator inbuilt into it. So I've kind of thought about that as well, but I think we just need to call it out when we talk about the game and sort of how we've decided. But I think the other one that's really critical is just, we did mention it last week, but the years that their games actually come out, like, I think it should be the year that most people regard the year that it came out, not like the year after when it came out on Xbox.
I agree.
But that's fuzzy as well. That's fuzzy. Yeah. Like, that's not always one for one, because sometimes it's like it came out right at the end of the year and then kind of really was known as the year after, because, it just released in Japan in December and really came to the West in January the following year. So I think we just got to apply common sense on those things.
What's crazy to me, so as part of getting ready for this, I went through and created a big list for each generation going back to, I think, 84.
And by the way, do you want me to put this online? I can actually put this online.
The only thing is there might...
Have a think about it.
When you're using Google as a source, there might be some inaccuracies about the release years. So I thought...
Well, no, but again, I think this is for us to consider. We consider that this is when these games came out. Well... Because it's all blurry, right?
It's all blurry, but I'm just like... Anyway, to kind of explain what I was going to about... Yeah. It's just amazing to me that something like Mario 3, like, that was a year and a half in Japan before it ever got ported here, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that it came out, Mario 3 came out the same year that Mario 2 came out in the US. In Japan, Mario 3 came out, is crazy to me.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was just...
It's the same as Australia. Yeah. Mario 2 and Mario 3 came out in the same year.
So... Anyway, let's look at some years. We're not going to have probably enough time to go through every single year, but no. But I've definitely created a short list of about 7 potential years with my favorite picks. What are you laughing about? That's what we're doing.
I don't think we have time to go through 7.
No. What are you laughing? The whole point of this is us choosing years. Why are you laughing about me shortlisting?
I was going to say maybe like top 5 or top 3 or something. We can go
did
blow
you
by
listen
blow.
to what I said? I said I shortlisted 7 and I've got 3 top out of those, right?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. The whole point of us is to choose a year here. What am I doing? Just coming into this blind with nothing?
No, I just know, like, the one thing that's good is, like, you're so deep on these things that I'm like, I actually thought there's a real possibility you'd want to talk about all 7 of the years and it'd be like a 2-hour conversation about it.
No, like, if it was up to me, we would have spent an hour on this, but we don't, we're 3 hours in the podcast. So, look, how about you maybe point out some years that you think are potential ones?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking how to do this. I'll actually probably go with the top 3, so starting from 3rd, if that makes any sense with what I'm saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my 3rd pick will be 2007. So 2007, BioShock, Halo 3, Portal. I think like 2007 will definitely go down. I'm just cross-referencing to see if it's also in your list. I think that's going to go down as one of the greatest years. Like, you had this is the year that you also had insane collections like the Orange Box come out. I didn't even mention Mario Galaxy. It's literally a year just stacked with games. I think it was also the year that Assassin's Creed started, like, from a franchise perspective.
Yeah.
I think one of the the great years of that era and that generation. So yeah, for me, I had that as third on my list of the years that you'd want to actually go through.
Can you believe that's not even in my 7 that I chose?
Really?
Yeah, it's a good year.
Interesting.
There's so many good years though.
It is, yeah.
2007.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know the the later we get into, especially like 360 or onwards, I've played so many more of these games than you have that it's not funny. So
yeah, correct.
It's
yeah,
like
correct.
I know there's a whole bunch of years here, except for when you start talking about PlayStation exclusives, that unless I kind of wanted to revisit them, I already kind of have such like my I know them inside and out basically. And with 2007, yeah, it is a big year. I think COD 4 is one of the biggest out of that because that essentially changed the whole genre. Yeah, look, I think that it's definitely, I don't think what we should go with, but it's a strong year, no doubt.
So what was your third?
My third was actually 1994.
Oh, you're going way back in the archives. Okay.
So 1994 was, to me, just had so many good 2D games coming out and a few 3D ones as well. So Donkey Kong Country, which we've been slowly playing as so we can give our impressions in a future podcast. But
well, and I think we probably could do that next week if you're ready to, because I'm about halfway through.
Yeah, but
yeah,
Final Fantasy VI, Earthworm Jim, Doom 2, Super Metroid.
Which is my favorite game of all time.
Like Sonic 3, and then you start getting into ones that I love, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, and things like that. The reason I went for that over any other SNES year is simply because of those big titles: Super Metroid, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy VI, and Earthworm Jim, and things like that. And even things like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which was I'd say more of an arcade title when you're talking about that. And X-Men Children of the Atom, Castlevania Bloodlines, System Shock, Sonic 3, heaps of stuff. So out of all those SNES eras, I thought that was the one that stood out to me the most. But it's third, so I haven't put it as my top.
Interesting. And by the way, if I say a year that is on your top 3 list, then you need to jump in as like, that's my number 1, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, and now you're going to be pissed about this one. So the second pick, and I've gone the opposite way and gone ultra modern. I've actually picked 2017. So 2017 is definitely the best era from a Switch perspective. You've had, Zelda Breath of the Wild, which I would regard as one of the best games of all time. Mario Odyssey nipping at its heels. Persona 5, Hollow Knight. It's just stacked with so many games. And I guess from my perspective, they had the game of the year. Everyone had their views at the time, but I would actually love to just play through all of these games and try to have a more balanced opinion on things like Breath of the Wild, which I know that we could probably talk about for 3 hours about that game, not just necessarily from a positive perspective, but also a negative perspective, especially from you. But yeah, I just think, if you wanted to pick something more modern, that to me is like the year to go with. I think there's, a variety of games in that year. It's pretty heavy on Nintendo, but there's still a lot of great games from Sony and then also Xbox as well. And yeah, so I had that actually as my number 2 pick that we should pick.
Yeah, so that is in my list of my 7. It's not in my top 3. It is, though, I 100% agree. That year, everyone knew that was a huge year. You had such huge hitters from the Switch standpoint as well as PlayStation. But the reason why is because I already know what number 1 would be for me. Like, I don't even have to play them all to know that. It's got to be Nier Automata. So, but no.
And by the way, I actually like Nier. So like that's, I know you're probably even trying to troll me. I actually really like that game. And you know what? To be honest, I feel like if we did that year, my views on all the games might have shifted, and I might actually put that game as the game of the year. Like that is not even a shock if that would happen.
But it's like there's heaps of good games that year. But I think with what we're trying to do, I also think it'll be very difficult to do that year, just given some of the big titles.
You'd need to get a PlayStation 4 for sure.
Well, yeah, it's not just that, but also when you talk about that year, like we've already talked about how we don't like playing scary games, and you got Resident Evil 7 and things like that. But It's
Yeah,
even
you have to
that
play
that
that.
was the year of Fortnite. That was the year of PUBG, and it's really difficult with those kind of games. And like, how do you even rate those games that aren't the same games anymore either? Now, I'm not saying that we would have to. We could probably say, well, they're live service games. It's very difficult, and they're also not things we're interested in anyway. I mean, this is our list. We don't have to include everything, but they were huge games that year, and yeah, that's a tough year. I think there's almost too many games that year to do. It sounds weird. I think
That's
there's
what you
almost.
want, isn't
I
it?
think that's almost just too many games. It's weird, but
What
yeah.
the hell? That's what you want, though. Anyway,
No,
yeah. No, it's
but
fair
it's got to
enough.
be
You've got
realistic.
your list. I've got my
It's got to
list.
be realistic if we want to actually play a bunch of these.
All right. So that was my number 2. What's your number 2?
So my number 2 is 1998.
We've gone like so different directions. I will say this was my number 4. This was my number 4 pick.
Yeah, so 98 was a huge year.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 2, it's insane. Like this is almost
when
the
you
same
just say
problem as 2017, honestly, but we've played a lot of these already at least. So but
And can I just say something quickly? Sorry to interrupt, but like I would say this is my number 1 pick if I'm being asked what's the greatest year in gaming. But that's not necessarily what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
I was trying to pick a year for us to have a discussion on games that maybe I haven't played, and it's like kind of an interesting juxtaposition. But I do think that this is the best year of gaming ever.
it's crazy. Just like Banjo-Kazooie, Baldur's Gate, Tekken 3, Tekken 3 is probably in one of my top 20 games of all time. Blast Corps, Xenogears, Marvel vs. Capcom. It's crazy.
Pokemon, just a little game called Pokemon.
Yeah, just Pokemon. I didn't even put Red or Blue there because
Buried on the list.
it's literally the first one. And like Grim Fandango, Fallout 2, it's crazy. Even Body Harvest, which is not a great game, but I love it. So Mystical Ninja 64, kind of a terrible game, but I love it. So
Yeah, I know you're struggling now.
yeah, it's a great year. So that's my second.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a really good pick. That's going to be interesting. All right, do you want to go into number 1s?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So my number 1 is a year that I actually think down the track, like, so you know how we are talking about 1998 being the game of the year. It's just so obvious it's the best year. Well, sorry, I'm saying that. I don't think you said that, but I'm saying I think 1998 is the best year of gaming. I feel like in 5 to 10 years' time, when people who are younger than us but are having this conversation, they will say 2011 is the best year of gaming ever. So 2011, Dark Souls, Skyrim, Minecraft, like from a top 3 kind of games and impacts on gaming and just like how they've landed in gaming. I actually think you'd probably struggle to come up with a better top 3 from a, overall impact. I think 98 is probably the only one that would ever challenge that with Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, and Metal Gear Solid for me. So yeah, no, I've put 2011 as number 1.
Yeah.
And I'm also doing this a bit selfishly because I know that you've gone deep on all these games and I haven't. So I think it's kind of a funny juxtaposition of games that I actually own but I haven't played in a lot of cases. And also selfishly as well, I'd love to play Skyward Sword because that game is very divisive, but I'm pretty open-minded to those style of games, so I'm kind of interested to actually have a crack at it.
Yeah, 2011's crazy because you just hit some of the big hitters, but for me, like I look at 2011, I'm like, Witcher 2, I love The Witcher 2, Deus Ex, Human Revolution, things like even Sonic Generations was a fantastic game. Games that I haven't played, like The Last Story and Tales of Xillia. There's so many good games within that 1 year. L.A. Noire, Ni no Kuni,
Yeah.
It's even Marvel vs. Capcom 3, although Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is probably, be the one that you're going to choose to play out of those games. Bastion, Dead Island's there, unfortunately, but, I'm not a fan of that game. But, yeah, even Modern Warfare 3, you're not going to say that.
Yeah, true.
Like, Modern Warfare 2 and the first one are probably going to be, the more, like, I guess, like, the games that kind of stand the test of time in terms of people's minds, but that's a huge game as well. But of course, like I can't go past Dark Souls and Skyrim. Like both those games, I've beaten both of those games like multiple times. And Arkham City, Arkham City, I've never played it. I've owned it for a long time. Big fan of Arkham Asylum, and I just can you believe it? Me not being able to finish the combat challenge achievements kind of like got me stuck in that series, and I never progressed. So I need to just give now that I don't care about those achievements anymore. I just need to play Arkham City. I think I might.
Yeah,
maybe I'll play
Arkham
it on.
City's good.
Maybe I'll play it on PC so I can bump it up. But
yeah, no, I liked Arkham City. I thought it was really good. And, you know, I think the big thing about this year is just the kind of weight on the industry that Dark Souls has had. Just, you know, people talking about it as being as sort of almost a genre. And then kind of almost the same with Skyrim in that kind of that field and just, you know, how much of an impact that game's had. And then probably the biggest game of all time now, like for whatever you want to call it, Minecraft. Like just the fact that that game, like what is it up to, like 200 and something million copies sold or some crazy number, or even more than that. It's just
the problem,
like that game is even bigger than we even realized.
The problem with Minecraft is unless you can find an archive, like it's impossible to play that game how it was in that era. So
Sure.
it's similar to what this thing I said about Fortnite is. How do you judge Minecraft? It has had so much added to it since it first came out. I've played a lot of it when it first got ported to Xbox One, but even that was obviously improved upon what the original release was. So it's tough to judge that. Yeah.
I think for that one, because you can get the old Java versions of it, I think you actually can play the old versions of it. But I definitely know in the case of live service games like Fortnite, you definitely can't go back and play those ones because that's so reliant on the server. But so number one pick for me would be 2011. Just think that it's got the beefiest amount of games and, you know, some serious heavy hitters, and, you know, the conversations around how to rank some of those games like Dark Souls, Skyrim, Portal 2. I don't even think we mentioned Portal 2. You know, it's just pretty crazy.
Okay, so I guess I got to give my first pick then, don't I?
Yeah, drum roll. Yeah.
My top pick is 1984.
Wait, are you serious?
I just want to make you play Pac-Land.
I think I played most of these games, so I can.
Honestly, 1984 is not bad. I mean, Excitebike's awesome. Although I don't think you'd ever need to play it more to judge it. My top pick is not 1984, by the way. My top pick.
I know I'm nervous about what it is.
My top pick is 2011.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
No way.
Yep.
That's crazy. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Because we did not talk about this beforehand. No. How funny.
So the reason being, obviously, we just talked about the games, but also I think it's much easier to play a lot of these games than it is. Like, not only has it got a great amount of good games, but I think it's easier to play a lot of these games in some form. So it kind of also meets the functional purpose of, are we actually able to go back and play many of these games? I also know that, you know, we both own a lot of these games. I've played the vast majority of these, but there's a bunch I haven't. You know, I haven't played Ni no Kuni. I just mentioned I haven't played Arkham City, but also there's a whole bunch of, I haven't played a lot of 3DS games. So, and I've always wanted to play 3D Land, Mario Kart 7, you know, I've played a lot of the tracks, of course, in the later ones that have ported. But it's a chance for me to kind of fill in the gaps that year as well. So I think 2011 is what we should go with.
Nice. Awesome. Well, you know, it's kind of like settled itself. It's not much of a debate as I thought there was going to be. Oh, that's funny. That's actually funny. Yeah, and it's going to be actually, man, I feel like it's going to be hotly contested because, you know, giving it the official Big Week in Gaming game of some other year, 2011 is going to be, because I know some of these games are some of your favorite games of all time.
One thing I will say is I don't envy the position of you having to try to judge some of these games, depending on how long we actually say we're going to take to do this. Because
we're going to do it to the end of the year. So can I just talk about this? So I think the idea will be, you know, this podcast, I want to make sure that there's an episode every single week. So, you know, Sunday night Australian time, and then Sunday morning US time, and, you know, midday in Europe and Sunday. So I think what we should do is play all these, and then over the Christmas, we'll probably have a break, unless there's really big news, but let's like record some sessions around talking about the top 10 lists and sort of, you know, scheduling in some podcasts where we actually cover what we think is the best game of 2011, if that seems right to you.
One thing I will say, though, is I think it's not going to be the best way to experience some of these games. For instance, Dark Souls, to take as an example, with that kind of game, you don't want to bounce off that game early, just nature of it. It's kind of, I think, important to know, what the full picture is. But of course, it's going to be hard to play every game to completion as well. Like when you talk about Skyrim, I've completed that game multiple times, but then when you suddenly, talk about, okay, well, trying to do that, justice is tough, but it's just a matter of, doesn't mean we have to complete a game, but I will just call out, just make sure, I guess, make sure you give Dark Souls a good go, because
Yeah, well, and we haven't spoken about this at all, but I'm thinking out loud, and you've already created a list of, what is it, about 20-ish games? I'm kind of thinking that we probably should, agree on what are the games that are almost in the scope of what could be considered the best game of the year of 2011, and then maybe have a list of, these are just games that we both have to play, and make sure we've played them to a level that you could review them, and then maybe some extra ones we can divvy up or something like that, so we can still speak to them all. Yep. So for instance, I don't think it'd be worthwhile me playing Assassin's Creed Revelations.
I also don't think it's worth you playing that game.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Whereas I think Skyrim, Dark Souls, Portal 2, Arkham City, probably Uncharted, Zelda, LA Noire, Minecraft, Deus Ex, off the top of my head, those games are just you have to play them. Because any of them, I believe, could be a game of the year. And then, we'll chat about, and let's put it on the website. So, bigwigpod.com, we'll put it somewhere. Where, what games are we playing, and, what's the kind of status of it or whatever.
Cool, sounds great.